Yeah, there we go. This one's against a player named Stork de la Mork, who has been around the high stakes games for a while. Definitely a player who I respect a lot. He's a little bit more tight and aggressive than what you'll find from uh, some of the higher stakes pros. I mean, I think there's kind of a perception that people who win in bigger games are really loose and aggressive. Like that's the style that a lot of people play. And looking at my stats, you can see you've got me at like. Well, actually, that's going to be irrelevant because that's going to include heads-up hands and stuff. Um, but Stork Dillemark here is 27-17, so he's actually playing probably a few more hands than some people, but he's a little bit less aggressive than a lot of people are. In general, I consider him one of the taggier players. His aggression factor is only 1.4. I think he's very good. I think he's probably one of the most successful tags. Probably, I would say probably even a better player than I am. Um, and we see a little bit of that in this hand. So first off, my raise here on the button. Deuce 4 suited is not a hand that I tend to play against, and these are both pretty good players here in the blinds. It's not if it's not a hand that I would ordinarily play against good players, even from my button. Part of the reason, or the reason that I'm playing it, is that this is a game that has antes, and particularly here with two kind of taggy players in the blinds. You see this guy is actually only a 23-10. Neither of them has particularly high 3-bet percentages, 5.2 and 3.3. I'm probably going to be raising any two cards here on the button. And the reason for that is there's just so much dead money in the pot already here. At a 10-20 game, we're looking at $10, $30, and then 18 in antes. It's $48 that's going to be in the pot. Um, but even before I raise. So here, when I'm risking $66 to win 48 right away, plus I'm going to have position post flop if I get called against people who aren't going to three bet really aggressively. I want to be raising any two cards on my button. I think there's just too much value in taking those antes right away. So that's why I'm playing this pot flat off. Stork de la Morte is a great example of kind of the way he plays. I think a lot of people here, myself included, would probably default towards three betting with ace jack suited. And Stork just chooses to call here with it in the small blind, which I think is also fine. I tend not to call very many raises out of my small blind, but I think a big suited ace is one of the best hands to call with if you're going to play a style the way Stork does that involves calling a fair number of hands, including out of the small blind. And we'll see how he manages to outplay me post flop, which of course is the reason why you'd make this call in the first place. So he checks to me, and I'm gonna bet. You can go back and forth on whether this is a good board to continuation bet. If you've seen one of my early videos, in fact, probably the first video I ever made for Poker Savvy was about looking at flop textures and deciding when to continuation bet. And I suggested that a flop like this one was an ideal flop to continuation bet. One big card, two little cards, not a lot of draws out there. And against less good players, I would say that that's true. With Stork de la Mark calling out of the small blind, I think that's he's not just calling there with random cards with the intention of just check folding the flop if he misses. When for Stork to call from the small blind, he needs a pretty decent hand, and he has one. Certainly, ace jack suited is well ahead of my button range, and I expect Stork to be at least as good at evaluating flop textures as I am. And that means when he looks at a flop like this, he's going to realize just as much as I am. This is a flop that probably did not help either of our ranges very much at all.